Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for The Other Lamb. So what The Other Lamb is essentially about is we center on this character, Sella, and she is involved in this really weird sort of Victorian cult of sorts from this man known as the Shepherd. They have all kinds of weird rituals and things like that. And one day she is told that she's going to perform this harvest of the lamb. It's this ritual that happens when she is entering adulthood. And basically after doing this, she starts to have this epiphany and really starts to question a lot of what she's been taught and really if any of what she's doing is really all that ethical and if she really wants to continue participating in it. So The Other Lamb overall, I really didn't know that much going into this movie. I knew it involved a cult. I knew that Raffey, Cassidy, and Michiel Heisman were in it, and that was enough for me because this is the kind of film that really seemed like it would get under my skin. This seemed like the kind of film that, is the smaller kind of movies that I'm really trying to look for. You know, a lot of people are saying to me like, oh, there's not a lot of 2020 release coming out. There are. You really got to look for them. And this is one that really seemed like it could go under people's radar. I could give it a review and then I could definitely tell you guys to check it out, which is why it is disheartening to say that this film really is not all that great. Look, The Other Lamb is not at all a terrible movie. It's just a very mediocre one that I think I'm very quickly going to forget, that I think really lost sight of its true potential, but we're just getting to right now. Oh, I will say, definitely one of the best parts of this movie, and one of the things that really does keep it from being kind of awful is the cast here. I think that the cast is really good. I think all of the acting is really solid in this movie, but especially when it comes to Raffey Cassidy, who has really been impressing me lately. All the way back from Tomorrowland, I knew she was going to be a star, and pretty much everything she's been in since then, I think she has been amazing in. She was the best thing about Vox Lux, and I have to say she's the best thing about this movie too. She just does, I think, a really great job at selling Sella's confliction in this movie. You get the sense that Sella's someone who has been very loyal to this cult and really considers them her family, but at the same time, she's really starting to question a lot of what she's been doing. You know, is this really the right method? Is this really something that she wants to participate in any longer? And I think that's something that Cassidy did a really good job with. When that shift happens, it feels believable in that way. You really do feel it. And Cassidy, I think, does a really good job at conveying that, especially in the third act of this movie where, you know, she really starts to revolt against them a little bit more, and she really starts to firmly, she starts to realize where she does firmly stand. I think overall, she just did a really great job with portraying that. I think she definitely did a good job of giving some layers to this character that really wasn't there to begin with. And I think she did a really good job with that. I really do wish she picked better roles because she continues to be the best thing about every movie she's in. Great actress for sure. I want to see her do something where she's actually utilized well, because first, this happened in Vox Lux, where she was the best thing about that, and now it's happened again here, and I wish she'd pick better roles, because, again, if there's anything that she's showing me here is that she is the best thing about, like, every movie she's in, and I really want to see her do something, like, really fucking great, because I think that she'd be talked about way more if that was the case. She's really not an actress I hear all that much about, and I think it's mainly because of the type of stuff she's doing. Again, not bad necessarily, but just not necessarily anything to write home about, but her performance is always remarkable, and that's definitely the case here. But I also very much do have to shout out Michiel Heisman as well. He does a really great job, I think, of playing this cult leader that just really gets under your skin, really creeps you out. You are constantly unsettled by him in this movie, and I think he did a really good job with that. Again, similar to Cassidy's character, there's not a lot going on with Shepherd as a character. He's not that complex of an individual, but I think Heisman did a really good job, I think, of really getting you to see this character, seeing why everyone is so intimidated by him in that way. There's some truly horrifying scenes with him in this movie, and I think he did a really good job with that. Aside from those two, who really do a great job, I think, grounding the whole film, Denise Gough is also really good in this film. I thought she definitely had some really solid stuff, and the other girls as well, even though they really don't have a lot to do here, I thought were also really well casted. All the acting here is really good. Definitely not the problem with this film at all. But now we get to the directing and the writing, which this is really where we get to the things that really do bring this film down. Now, look, I will say, from a directing perspective, in terms of atmosphere, this film absolutely does a great job with that. Throughout all of this film, I definitely did feel very unsettled. It had a very eerie sort of feeling to it, and I think the film does do a good job with that. The problem is it doesn't really have a style of its own beyond it's trying to be like said film. There are points of this movie that reminded me of Midsummer. There are points of this film that reminded me of, say, something that Robert Eggers would do, like, say, The Witch or something like that. But sadly, I didn't really feel like this film had a distinctive style, and I think that really is its biggest problem. And because of that, it's not really that scary. I think that's its biggest problem, is that it leans into horror way more than it should. I don't really think this film works as a horror film. It's really not that scary in that way. There are scenes that are very creepy. There are scenes that are really hard to watch, but it's not really a film that I think works in terms of horror. I think if this was more of a drama, then I really do think this film could have worked a lot better, because as a horror, it's not really working in that way, and I think that's the one thing that does bring it down. But it's not my biggest issue with the film. My biggest issue with the film easily is the writing here, which is just all kinds of messy in this film. C.S. McMullen, I don't believe is a well-known writer. It very much feels like she is a first-time writer, and it's unfortunate. I think she's done some smaller projects before, but this is really like her first movie. And it really does show. It really does show that she has not done any writing in terms of, that said before. She's done some stuff, you know, like writer's room assistant and things like that. But this is really her first gig on her own. And I'm sorry to say, it's just really not all that impressive. I think her biggest issue with this film is the story itself. While it does sound interesting, it's just not very well handled. The main character, Sela, aside from Cassidy's performance, I know jack shit about her. I know that she is entering adulthood, and that the cult is looked down upon for being unpure in that way. Basically, girls that, you know, have their period, they're looked at as unpure. I understand that. But aside from that, and Sela being terrified that she's going to be looked at in a certain way, because of how this has happened to other girls, there really is not that much of an arc with her character. And so because that, it's hard to stay fully invested in what was going on. I feel like there should have been a little bit more there. I feel like there was an opportunity. There's stuff brought up about her mother and how this cult leader knew her mother, but it's not really touched upon ever. It's just kind of brought up in passing every so often. Like, it's kind of the thing he uses to intimidate her. And I feel like it would have actually been a much better choice if this would have been her arc throughout the movie. Like, what is it that her mother did wrong that she needs to try to prevent, or that got her mother to where it is? I feel like that would have been a more solid arc than what they ended up doing, which was they attempted to connect her to Denise Gough's character, but that also doesn't work because Denise Gough doesn't feel like a character in this movie. She feels like a plot device. She is someone that has been abused by the Shepherd. She's been through a ton of shit, and we're supposed to care for that reason. And obviously, yes, what the Shepherd has done to her is inexcusable. It's very deplorable in that way, and it's definitely very disgusting. But again, we don't really get the time to get to know this character. The bond between them, it's very sporadic. I feel like it should have been the main bond in the movie, but very often it's not. It's very often Sela and her sisters that are, who, again, we don't know anything about. And that's really the biggest problem, is that nothing is really that well fleshed out in this movie. It always just kind of feels like it's beginning in this way. And I think that really is a big problem here. The cult as well, we really don't get to know them all that well. We know of some things that they do that I did find very intriguing. Like I said, the way that the Shepherd looks at life, I think is very fascinating. You know, the certain things that they can do. There's a scene where one of them is trying to tell a story, and they talk about how the only stories they can talk about are of the Shepherd and of his wife, which I found to be really interesting. Like, why does he feel this way? The problem is the film doesn't really give you a reason as to why any of these girls are buying his bullshit. What is it that he is selling them? Why do they care about what he's saying? They don't really do a good job with that, I think. And that's what brings this film down for me, is that there is a big disconnect in between why any of them care about this cult leader. Why would they want to follow me? Because he just kind of seems like a dick throughout the movie, and there isn't really a reason why he's doing all this stuff. And I think that's its biggest problem, is that the film really need to take more time to flesh out this cult, and they really don't do that, and that very much brings down this film. But my other real issue with this film is that it gets very messy as the film goes on, and a lot of that's because Sela is a character that will frequently have these visions, and these visions are very, very graphic, and they're not visions where they're brief, like they're throughout the movie. The problem is, towards the end of this film, those visions really start to bleed into what was actually going on, and I honestly had a really hard time figuring out what is a vision and what wasn't, and I think that's the other thing that really did bring down this film. While I understood how Sela felt, definitely, I couldn't figure out what was actually happening and what was in her head. I don't think the film did a really good job with communicating that. I thought by the end I had a grapple on that. You know, I'd fully understood, like, you know, what was what. But then with the way the movie ends, really felt like that wasn't the case. It felt like maybe her visions were... I really couldn't tell. I had a really hard time trying to figure out what was what. And I just don't think the film did a good job of that. And I've said it before, I have no problem with ambiguous endings, but I just feel like this film didn't earn that ambiguousness. It didn't do enough with these characters, and it didn't do enough with this setting to really fully suck me in, and I think that's what really does bring this film down, is just the writing here. It's very subpar. There are some scenes, like I said, that I think are really well done. Some of the things that the Shepherd does is absolutely horrifying to watch, and there are some scenes that are very effective. There's some stuff with Sela as well that could have potentially been really interesting, but it's just not really dived into all that much, and I think that's what really brings down this film. The cinematography here, again, the one thing I will definitely not dispute is that the cinematography is gorgeous looking in this film. There really isn't a single frame that doesn't look great. The film is very well lit in that way. The scenes of them in this rural sort of environment is really well done. I think they did a really good job with that, and I really did love the cinematography here. There's a lot of haunting imagery. That stuff is great. It's very well portrayed, and it feels very real in that way. So I don't have a problem with cinematography. The score as well is really great in this movie. I really did love the score in this film. It's very eerie and very creepy, and I think the score was definitely very well handled. And then the editing in this film, like I said, is very choppy, especially in the third act. There were many moments where I was just very confused as to what was going on, and the way the movie ended, I thought was terrible. The last line of dialogue is laughably stupid. I did not understand what was going on. The film went so off the rails at that point, and I feel like it completely lost sight of its potential. Like I said, The Other Lamb could have been a really great movie. It could have been something that really got under my skin. It definitely has some effective moments. It's very much boasted by some great performances from Raffey, Cassidy, and Michiel Heisman. It's got a really great score. It has some cool ideas in there, but unfortunately, because there's been so many other cult films, because there's been other films out there that have done it better, The Other Lamb just doesn't really do a lot to separate itself, and as a result, it just comes across as very forgettable. There are things that I do like about this movie, but at the end of the day, this just really feels like a throwaway. It feels like a film that just really didn't understand its full potential, and that's what really does bring it down for me. So overall, I am going to give The Other Lamb a C. But over, guys, to my review of The Other Lamb. Let me know what you guys saw this movie overall. Lift your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.
Moving on.